Okay, so um, I guess we'll continue to the actual topics I want to cover today.
Okay.
In that sense, I'd like to take like a bottom-up approach,
Mm-hmm.
start like with physical security, and then go up through all like kind of the layers of the technology.
Mm-hmm.
Um, okay, so first topic is peripheral devices. So these are like USB sticks, everything you plug into your PC, your laptop. Um, that's everything that's not kind of your laptop yourself. So also your monitor, all that stuff. Um, all these connections have some kind of API and some kind of protocol they speak, and lots of these connections can be abused to hack you. Um, Especially USB is a thing here. Also, Firewire, um, and the the successor of Firewire, I think it's called Lightning, isn't it? Is that a thing?
You would have to explain what Firewire and Lightning is.
Okay, so Firewire is um, something similar to USB, but I think it was invented by Apple.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have Thunderbolt. That's it. Thunderbolt was also done, I think, by Apple
Yeah.
and maybe others. It's just similar to USB. It's like kind of a universal um, thing you hook things up to, and you want to be careful with all that stuff. I think for threat model number one, which is a low res active actor, you will be most concerned about USB sticks and infected USB sticks because they're quite easy to make, and someone can just like hand you a document on a USB stick, and he might be able to. He might have found some kind of exploit kit on the internet and will try to hack it with that. So one general advice is to use SD cards for data transfer between two. So if you can't use the internet, which is always the best thing to do, because you don't attach anything to your device, then use SD cards, because SD cards um, have the lowest attack surface and are really only about data and not about all the other funky stuff. So these are the cards you put in your camera, you put them in your Android smartphone to extend your storage. That's the small cards I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of like a basic protection on a physical layer where um, especially like the higher you go up in the threat models, there's some really nasty stuff going on there, um, especially in the third level. So you probably, if you're up there, you maybe want to like glue all your ports, because it's really easy just to stick something in there when you're not looking,
Mm-hmm.
and like have a local attack. And local attacks um, are really dangerous, but they're not that common. So it's like an low low probability but really high impact attack that you can easily evade by just using SD cards instead of USB sticks, and um, trying to um, well, never hook up something that's not yours to your laptop.
What if you
That's kind
disable
of a rule of thumb.
what if you disable USB in the BIOS?
Um, I think that should suffice. I'm not entirely sure.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're on threat model one or two, that's totally okay. If you're threat model three, you might want to look further into that
Mm-hmm.
and have a more advanced reading on that topic.
Okay.
So connected to that is how to protect data at rest. So data at rest is data that's not currently in use. It's kind of like if it's either on a USB stick or on your hard drive and your laptop is powered off. And what what people like to do is erase stuff if they feel that something shouldn't be read by others. But well, deleting stuff in your operating system doesn't actually delete anything from the actual hard drive. It just tells the file system that the space that was used by that file is now available again. So when you delete a file, you can just turn off your computer, take a drive out, and use maybe a Linux machine or go to some vendor, some service, and have a data recovery program run over the hard drive, and you'll be able to recover that file
for free.
So-
Basically, this is free. You can do this with
Yeah.
no cost.
So all the Linux utils, they're really good. I've used them myself. They're free, but it's not that hard to do. So you can easily just recover all that data. Other funny story that a former colleague of mine, he loved making photos, and he made a couple of photos that he probably shouldn't have taken, and the security guard ordered him to delete the photo in front of his eyes. He was like, "Yep, no problem. I'll just delete whatever you want me to do." Deleted the photos, took out the SD card, put a new one in because he didn't want the camera to override the deleted picture.
Mm-hmm.
And at home, he just used a tool to recover it again. It was never gone. So that's a really good thing to know.
That's a good way to troll the whoever was asking that to delete the picture.
yeah. But that's again operational security. If the security guard doesn't know how this works, they were unable to enforce the rules.
Exactly.
Okay, so the only thing that what you can do is if you delete something, there are tools that kind of like really delete the free space. So there are tools that will go over all the space on your hard drive that is marked as available, which includes deleted files, and will kind of like overwrite that with random data to have it actually deleted. A much cleaner method is to override the whole hard drive with random data or zeros. In that sense, it doesn't really matter. As long as you override it with some other form of fresh data. That works pretty well with normal hard drives. With SD cards, you have to be careful because and now, so that's a threat level 3 thing now. With SD cards and solid state drives, they're made out of cells, and whenever a cell dies, the SD card will actually detect it and will logically assign a spare cell to that address, to that storage address in the SD card. So there might be still data lingering around in the SD card that is inaccessible, except if you have lots of resources and you really open this thing up, solder out the cells, and manually extract the data from that cells, which is really expensive, takes really long. You need experts for that. You need a lab. So that's really a threat model 3 thing. But just for you to know, SD cards, solid state based technology, is really hard to erase. Something that some vendors do is that they provide an delete instruction so that the OS asks the hard drive, please really delete this space. But then again, you have to trust that the vendor actually implemented that correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So what solves all these data address problems is to use full disk encryption. So never ever write data, plain text on your hard drive, always encrypted, because it's really way easier to just throw away the encryption key than to delete all the data. Because when you throw away the encryption key, then everything is unreadable and no one can recover it anymore.
Can I ask a question regarding this full disk encryption?
Mm-hmm.
So, let's say I take an SSD drive and I have some sensitive data on it, but I don't want to throw away the drive, so I encrypt it, and then I just throw away the key, and I don't care about that anymore. So,
yeah.
but I still want to use the device. So I plug it into my computer, I reformat it, and encrypt it again. Is that old data that I encrypted the first time going to still be encrypted, or is it going to be somehow decrypted, and use the new encryption key? If you know what I'm saying.
So if you only formatted the old encrypted data will not be erased. Mm-hmm. It will just be still there, but not be regarded as data, just as empty space. And of course, you could like access the drive on a it's called like a block level, and just read everything from it, and you'd have the old encrypted data, but without the encryption key, it's useless.
Okay, so there's like sort of a double encryption. So like the old encryption key is gone, and I re-encrypt the drive. I encrypt it again with a new key, totally new key, and put new data in there. And
okay, so I think I hear a misconception here.
Okay.
So if you set up full disk encryption,
mm-hmm.
the hard drive, the program doesn't go over the hard drive and like encrypt everything. It will just mark the hard drive as it will just lay a foundation for it, and will encrypt all the metadata or most of it on there, and then only when you write a file to the hard drive, the operating system will encrypt all the chunks of the file that are saved to the hard drive. So just like normally writing things to the hard drive. So just like encrypting a hard drive will not erase everything that's on there. You will have to first wipe the drive and then format it with encryption.
Mm-hmm.
So just encryption means just that every file you write to it, the OS will first encrypt on a file system level and then write it to disk.
Okay. So if I'm still reusing the same drive, over the years, and it has the same, I encrypted it multiple times with different keys, then the data can be recovered from the old encryptions.
Well, as soon as the data is overwritten, it can't be recovered.
Yeah, but if it is not, then
if it is not, if it is not, and you still have the old encryption key,
okay,
theoretically you could recover it, but it's really, really hard because you might be missing information on where the file is on the hard drive and all that stuff. So theoretically, yes, but practically not really.
Yeah, and also
this is definitely a threat model 3 thing, and nothing to worry about. Threat model 1 and 2.
But also, the threat model 3 adversaries are going to be able to know that you try to wipe the drive. So it's not going to look like it's just a fresh new drive. They're going to know that you were trying to wipe the data.
Well, it depends. Normally, so you can wipe it in two ways. You can fill the drive with zeros, then it will kind of look as new, or you can fill the drive with random data, which then it will look like everything's encrypted.
Mm-hmm.
So, but if you just fill the whole disk with random data, nobody will be able to tell if there was data on there before or not.
Mm-hmm.
So regarding wiping, I think at some point the US intelligence community recommended wiping it 7 times.
Mm-hmm.
That's really not necessary. For levels for threat level 1 and 2, once is enough.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if you do it with random data instead of zeros. And threat level 3, if you're really scared, do it twice, but twice is enough also. It's just such a huge hassle to go through that data and recover it. Nobody's gonna do it. So especially if it's encrypted anyway. So if it's plain text and you're really scared, you can't do it more than twice. But if it was encrypted anyway, twice is enough.
I've read somewhere that you could try to wipe the data 32 times.
Yeah. if you're really that scared and it makes you feel better, go ahead.
So is it still theoretically possible to recover data that was overwritten 32 times?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Well, definitely not, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, if you've done it that often, you will have to like go in there and manually with an electron microscope extract the data bit by bit. Well, nobody's gonna do that, really.
Yeah.
So, the main point being, don't do wiping. Use encryption. It's much better. And wiping is hard. Encryption is easy, at least to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the main message here.
Okay.
And encryption is really easy. I think every major OS and every phone already offers full disk encryption. So it's sometimes as easy as ticking a box. Yes, I want full disk encryption and maybe entering a password, but that's it. I think it's most difficult on Windows still. So you may want to link to a guide how to enable that. But yeah, it's still really easy on actually all devices.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I actually had like one minor question regarding data at rest. So this data at rest is also concerned with many applications that store databases on phones and devices, and one of the ways that people can or adversaries can bypass end-to-end encrypted apps is that they are trying to get access onto the device and read the data before they are even encrypted. And Signal, well, there's like no like real mitigation against this as far as I know, but Signal, the open source messaging app, offers you a solution to delete your messages or to self-destruct your messages and even delete the database after it reaches a certain size in kilobytes or megabytes. So is this a good enough solution?
That's so. Deleting files in a way is a lot better if you have full disk encryption enabled, because there are two ways to get the data. Is you can either ask the operating system, please give me that file, and it'll just tell you it doesn't exist, or you can use you can get the hard drive out and check manually, but there you have full disk encryption. So there are actually protected against that quite well, and deletion works much better with full disk encryption. But still, there's the possibility of when. Oh wait, let me think about that. Just having I'm not entirely sure, but this should actually work as intended, and the data should not be recoverable.
Mm-hmm.
It could be that if you have the encryption key of the disk, that you could recover some data.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the whole sense of, well, not giving that away.
So if the Chinese Muslims that were targeted by the iOS exploits, if they had this option enabled that it would automatically delete their messages that were at rest, then the adversaries would not have had access to those their data.
Yes, data that's on disk. But still, depending on the type of access they had, if they were like system admin or like root on that device, they could just snatch the data while it was in memory. So
Okay.
memory is still unencrypted, and if you root, you can just read every memory of every app that's running. So you can just extract all the keys and all the messages directly from memory.
Security.
And there's no real protection against that.
Okay.
Because if you really own the device, then, well, yeah.
Security is depressing.
It is. But still, there's lots of stuff you can do, and there's really good protection, and you can get really far with some basic principles.
Okay, what else is there?
Full disk encryption is one of these basic principles.
Okay, all right. So what are the other tools?
Next up would be like the topic of OS security that we'd go into.
Okay.
Before that, I'd like to give a small information about data decay, because you asked about that. So data decay is so the things we store data on will not hold forever. They will at some point break down. So if you have a hard drive at home, save some precious photos on them, and then 10 years later look at them, you might find a couple pixels that are like off and maybe not what they're supposed to be. And that's because just with the material of the hard disk weakening over time, some bits might not be readable and might fall over, and that's when data becomes corrupt slowly. But that's nothing that will happen ever in a data center that is continuously monitored, where there's life cycle management, where broken hard drives are replaced immediately, all that stuff. So that's something to worry about if you save personal data over a long period of time. But for good or bad, this won't happen in a data center.
That's good to know. Yeah.
Just to have this on there about data decay.
So that's regarding syncing through cloud for people who are wondering. Yeah.
Okay, so OS security. OS security is actually quite hard because the OS is such a huge pile of software that is really hard to keep secure. The single most thing I recommend for all threat models is do updates. Whenever there's an update, for whatever software, do not ever use out-of-date operating systems. That's the single thing, that's the most important thing I look out for when buying a smartphone, is how fast does the vendor issue updates, especially security updates, and how long will it support it. So how long will the vendor commit to provide security updates for that phone and operating system version? So that's really important, because if you don't get fixes for the vulnerabilities on your device that are already used in the wild, then, well, there's a big hole in your security, and you really want to close that, and you really don't want to leave that open. And of course, there's mitigation you can use in antivirus or firewall, but that's, especially with antivirus, it's just patch on security. It just won't. It will not work every time.
Mm-hmm.
It will cover most cases, but there will be things that will be able to bypass your antivirus.
Mm-hmm.
And so OS updates is the single most important thing when it comes to operating system security.
That's very true, actually. But you mentioned that you choose your phone based on how committed the specific vendor is to software updates. So can you be more specific in how you go about this, or which names you would probably go to, or how do you find that information even?
So most of the vendors have this written either on the homepage in general, or will have a section on the specification of a model on the homepage, where they will tell you how long they will support that model and which updates it will get. The last Android phone I bought was a Nexus 5X, which is one of the Google phones, and I bought that one because this one is the phone. These are the phones with the best update record, and then before I used it, I immediately wiped all the Google thing off it and put Copperhead OS on there.
Mm-hmm.
But still, Google only had 2 years left of security updates for that model, and this alternative security hardened Android version, Copperhead OS, can't just support something that Google doesn't.
Okay.
So I knew this was limited for a time, but I didn't see any better option at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And what also happened then is that the two founders of that company got in a fight, and the technical founder deleted all the signing keys. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm not gonna get any updates anymore. So
Wow.
that was a bit of a bummer.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't recommend Copperhead OS anymore. The technical founder is still in the game and still trying to create a secure and great Android OS. He's called Daniel McKay, and you can probably find him on Twitter or wherever. And he has a new product going. I don't know how well it's going, but it's probably worth checking out and see how that is currently doing.
Okay.
But yes, it is a lot about just seeing like how will updates come along and how long will it support it, and especially for like popular alternative OSs like Swanagen OS, which is now called Lineage OS, or are we one name further yet? I'm not sure. I lost track on like how that evolved, but that project, whatever the name is now, they have generally a quite good update record like how fast and how quickly they provide security updates.
But
So
even Lineage cannot go beyond what the original vendor offers, correct?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's true. So the first thing is always check what the original vendor will do for a device, because that's kind of the last resort you can do,
Mhm.
and then you can check if there's an alternative OS that will provide maybe more or less than that.
Okay.
So I mentioned firewall and antivirus before. These are like the two main technologies that come to mind if you talk about like OS security. First, I want to note that firewalls and antivirus solve two very different problems, but they're often sold as a single package, because antivirus companies at some point started just to adding a firewall to their offering. So firewall is about blocking malicious network connections from being established. So it tries to like block communication between an application and the internet that may be malicious. And then the antivirus blocks the malicious process from being executed in the first place. So it analyzes not the network, but the processes itself. And when it deems something to be malicious, it will either kill it, delete it, or whatever, how the system is configured. So every operating system has a firewall built in, which is great, but the effectiveness is varying. If in Linux, you have to configure it yourself anyway, and you'll have to go and read about that. On Mac, it's easier. You could just like tick a box and have a couple of basic settings, and that's nice. And on Windows, you can also like turn it up a notch and check which apps are allowed to do connections and stuff, and you could like sort through that to harden your system, or you can use a third-party firewall or even an application firewall that lets you regulate this on an application basis.
Mm-hmm.
So, but with firewalls, the OS is actually in some aspects okay. So, especially in threat model 1 and 2, the OS level firewall should be okay. With threat model 3, you're gonna really want to like block everything that you don't want explicitly want to allow.
Mm-hmm.
With antivirus, the last couple of years have brought a very, I think, delighting change, in the sense that especially the Windows built-in antivirus has gotten much better, and industry experts have started to suggest to not use a third-party antivirus anymore, but just rely on the built-in Windows one, because it's getting really good, actually.
Is it just because it's getting really good, or is there something wrong with getting a third-party antivirus?
Well, there are a couple of things that are wrong with getting a third-party antivirus. So what they tend to do is to like just have loads of features and do great things, but in the process, they take the freedom to break things. So on multiple occasions, antivirus products have installed their own root certificate and broken up HTTPS traffic to do their magic. And then, whoops, forgot to correctly verify the certificate of the server. So anybody, if you were using Get Antivirus, anybody could pose as your bank and your browser would believe it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just a mishap that, well, is just isn't allowed to happen. And that was a big shame for the antivirus industry. And that's probably one of the big things where people started to wake up and like, I'm not sure if that antivirus is that good at all.
And this was like every antivirus software or just a specific company?
No, I think 2 or 3
Okay.
did that. And there are also other problems. For example, there are antivirus systems that like inject a thread into Firefox, kind of like not friendly, but kind of like take over some part of the Firefox process to do some security there. But Firefox has so many problems with these antivirus systems that do that. I think the responsible guy publicly stated that please don't use third-party firewalls because it just breaks Firefox in so many ways. It's just a hassle to deal with. And of course, everyone thinks, oh, Firefox crashed again. Like they just can't get their stuff together.
Mm-hmm.
But it's actually another program on the PC injecting themselves into Firefox and breaking it.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a couple of stupid things that they've done, and one recent example I read about was that I think Kaspersky had some security feature where they injected an ID into web pages, and that made users trackable. And I was like, what were you thinking? But well, I don't know what sometimes these vendors think that they're doing with what they're doing, but there's so many cases of antivirus vendors doing stupid things that I've become very cautious.
Okay, that's good to know.
So one last thing about antivirus is that most of them, like almost all of them, are like kind of a patch on security thing. They don't solve the problem, they just try to work around it. So they can't just detect, they can just look at a program and tell if it's malicious or not. They need some kind of database that helps them identify them. So all these antivirus vendors have big teams that 24/7 look at malware, try to find ways to identify that malware, and then update the database that's then shipped to all the customers. And the customers then have the most current signature database, what they call it mostly, and that will help the US, the antivirus identify viruses. So whenever a virus isn't known to an antivirus, there's nothing the antivirus can do about it.
Mm-hmm.
So especially if you're in a threat model 3, well, antivirus won't help you a lot. So traditional antivirus. There's a new type of antivirus rising that uses like heuristics, kind of a behavior profile that works well. It works okay. The problem with that is that there are a lot more false positives, and it will mark things as a virus which are actually not. And then also there's a very interesting company that I've been watching for some time now. It's called Silence, and what they use some kind of machine learning thing, but they at least claim to be really good at detecting 0 days and everything that looks malicious. And they seem to be really good with what they're doing. Of course, I don't have the skill and the time to verify exactly what they're doing, but that's the only vendor that caught my interest in the last couple of years, because they really seem to have found a solution that will solve stuff and not just be a endless cat and mouse game. So if that would be something I'd probably recommend someone in the threat model 3 stage, depending on who your threat actor is, because it is a US company. And
Okay.
well, yeah.
There is that.
Okay, so I think that concludes my suggestions for OS security.
So
Okay.
what's up with the security of the network that users can do?
With network security now, we're not going to the this is just plain network. We're not going to look at stuff like the browser yet. That's a whole section on its own. So we'll just go into connections in general. So specifically, you ask about like how connections are can be attacked, either from your like home router or from a public Wi-Fi or your ISP. And well, in general, all these three are in a very similar position. So between you and whatever server you were talking to, there are lots of hops in between, and this usually starts with either your home router or public Wi-Fi, then goes to your ISP or that of the Wi-Fi, and then from that ISP it will go to another ISP and another ISP. So there are like different levels of ISPs, and then at some point it will end up in the data center where the server is that you're trying to connect to. So in every hop on this whole journey that your packet takes through the internet can possibly attack your connection. And of course, if your connection is not encrypted, then the attacker can either change something or inject something to attack you, or just listen passively and find out whatever you're doing. And that's why encryption is the primary defense in the network layer that we use. And the most common encryption here is TLS, which stands for Transport Layer Security, and that's the thing that's the security part of HTTPS. So TLS, what it does is it, for one, encrypts the data stream that you have with the server, and on the other part, it will verify the identity of the server. So the server has a certificate that proves that the server is in fact the server that you are wanting to talk to. So in this, for one, like shields your information from being leaked to an attacker, and on the other part, verifies that you are talking to the server that you want to talk to, and that nobody's impersonating that server and is doing a man-in-the-middle attack. A man-in-the-middle attack is when an actor tells you that, hey, I'm the server you're looking for, and then tells the server, hey, I'm the client that wants to connect to you, and kind of sits in the middle between you and the server you want to talk with, and tries to actually not be detected. So a man in the middle normally just forwards all the data there is, but then may at one point in time alter some of the data to maybe attack you or to maybe attack the server. So a man in the middle could, for example, inject a JavaScript to attack my malicious JavaScript to attack my browser, or he could change the bank account number that I'm wanting to send money to, attacking the server in that sense, or the service that I'm using. And that's why we need encryption or TLS for everything that's going on the network.
So TLS mitigates this man-in-the-middle attack?
Yes. If it's not like broken by other means, like the antivirus we mentioned before, that would just not correctly verify the servers and then make this possible again.
Okay. So how difficult is it to perform a man-in-the-middle attack? So what kind of threat model is this for?
Well, man-in-the-middle on TLS is, it depends really. Most of the times it will be threat model number 3, so high resource and active actor. But depending on where you are, this might be common. It might fall into threat model 2, where, for example, that's what recently I think Kazakhstan tried to do, is to get all their citizens install a root certificate so they could do a TLS man in the middle on the whole country. And luckily, I think every big vendor blocked their certificate, so they won't be able to do that, at least not in the way they wanted to do it. So depending on where you are, this might even fall into threat model number 2, which is a high resource but passive actor.
Okay, this is interesting because now you mentioned some slightly different aspect of the threat model number 3, right? Because, or like specifically high resource aggressors and adversaries. Like let's take the NSA. So the NSA may want to compromise a specific target, which in this case could be a user from our audience, but most of our audience, or a lot of people from our audience, are using Proton Mail, and Proton Mail is now a target for the NSA because they use end-to-end encryption and they want to break it, right? So users of Proton Mail are a passive target of the NSA, while Proton Mail may be an active target of the NSA. You know what? If you know what I'm saying, so it's like it's both active. It can be both active and passive at the same time. So it's active from the viewpoint of Proton Mail, and passive from the viewpoint of every Proton Mail user. So this can be actually much more common. Wouldn't you say?
Well, the problem is that it's really hard to not be detected. And so if you really want to do a man-in-the-middle attack on TLS, the big hurdle is to get a trusted certificate on the client's computer.
Okay.
And that's not something that generally someone has. So normally you'd actually have to hack the device of the user.
Okay, so just to be
also a lot more different hurdles to take, but that's the main one.
So to be clear, for an average user, this means that if they go to a ProtonMail website, in this case, they're gonna see this iconic green padlock, and if they click it, they can see the certificate authority, which is going to be ProtonMail Ltd or whatever they're called. So that's what you're talking about. This is how a user can verify that the authority, that the server that they're visiting is an authentic server.
Well, yes, but the whoever is doing the man-in-the-middle attack will, of course, create a certificate that will exactly match the original one.
Mm-hmm.
So the verification is a bit more complex. So what you can do is to check the certificate and the serial number and the authority who issued it, and then you can check the certificate logs for that certificate. So there, with all these troubles with issuing certificates, and there have been a lot of misissued certificates in the past. Google actually started to do this project called Certificate Transparency, which is kind of a blockchain, similar to blockchain type thing, where every certificate ever seen in the wild and issued by compliant certificate authorities is registered in that registry. So that would make it really hard for attackers to check to be in there without being detected, because of course all these big companies like ProtonMail, they get an alert whenever a certificate is issued for their domain.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense.
So
okay.
you either have to fool the public or hack the system. The third option is to hack the service directly of ProtonMail and snatch their certificate, because this won't be detectable, and then you can just passively decrypt the connection. But of course, ProtonMail also uses end-to-end encryption, which means that this alone won't help to spy on ProtonMail users.
Okay, so yeah, that's an interesting observation. So when we compare this to previously we discussed iOS exploits, and they are quite expensive, and they cost like $1 million or $2 million to get them, and they basically require very selective targeting, because once they're used in the wild, they can be wasted. So when you compare that to man-in-the-middle attack, what's the likelihood of a man-in-the-middle attack compared to an iOS exploit? 0 day, 0 click. This is more common.
Well, it depends. If the most common thing would be that someone, some kind of malware installs a root certificate on your machine, that someone actually hacks a server or like gets a certificate authority to falsely issue a certificate is rather rare. So it mostly will be in combination with some kind of malware, but then the attacker already has compromised your system anyway. So I would put it in like the same on the same level as custom exploits. So
okay,
TLS attacks on TLS is not something you'll commonly see.
Okay, that's
it's much easier to use other methods.
Okay, that's comforting to hear. So more or less, websites that use TLS are quite secure.
Well, the connection to the website is secure.
Yeah.
What happens on the website itself is a whole other story.
That's a different story.
That in the next section.
Yep. Yeah, that's true.
So, and that's also where we get to the second point that's related to that, where what's the difference between end-to-end encryption and just transport layer security. So end-to-end encryption means that I encrypt data on my device, send it to the server, it's stored encrypted, and at some point sent back to me, I decrypt it locally. That's end-to-end, because or like for someone else. So the decryption is only done by end user devices. And then with TLS, it's only transport encrypted, so it's decrypted on my device. It's encrypted on my device. It's decrypted on the server, stored in plain text on the server, or encrypted in another method on the server, mostly, like full disk encryption. And then whenever I requested information, it is encrypted for transport, sent to me and decrypted locally. So the difference is that without end-to-end encryption, the service provider can always see my information.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
So that's so the end-to-end encryption is another security layer that even if the TLS, let's say NSA breaks through the TLS of ProtonMail, what can they get access to when there's another layer of end-to-end encryption?
I'm not fully familiar with how ProtonMail exactly handles it, so take this with a grain of salt.
Mm-hmm.
But how far I understand how this works is that when you open ProtonMail in the browser, you enter your password, and then like some different form of password is then sent to the server as kind of pre-authentication. If you pass that, it will send you your encrypted private key back to your browser, and it will then, with the real password, decrypt that private key, and then you will authenticate the server again with your private key, and then you will be given access to your encrypted content, emails, and then it will send these emails back to you. So it's kind of a multi-stage authentication process where they store an encrypted private key of yours in order to do that. So all the encryption of the actual content is done within the browser.
Mm-hmm. So yep.
What's important about ProtonMail is, as far as I understand, that only the message contents are encrypted. That means all the email headers are still plain text in the sense of like the subject line, like who sent it to whom, when, who was involved, all the message IDs and stuff. And as far as I understand, that's the case.
It is the case, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So while ProtonMail is the best in class for that at the moment, it's still not perfect, and it's still not where we want to be.
Yeah, Snowden had a remark on this, and he said that email communication is simply too metadata heavy, and he doesn't recommend it as a secure or private means of communicating with anybody. And then he proceeded to say that Signal, the instant messenger, is a better way to communicate privately, because there is far less metadata on Signal than on.
But there still is some.
There is the time you created your Signal, you registered for Signal, and there is the last time you connected to Signal. That's all.
But then on the server of Signal itself, of course, the server must know from the messages themselves who they're for. So
yeah, but
whenever you send me a message and I'm not online, the server has to store this message until I am online.
I think they've recently started obfuscating that information. I'm not sure if they're calling it obfuscated sender or something like that.
Okay. I don't know. So, but this information, at least who the message is for, and combined with the connection the message comes in, you'll always have from, to, and a timestamp.
Yeah.
That's the minimal amount of information that, like, at some point exists, even if just briefly.
But I think they've just implemented some sort of like obfuscated sender, so like like half of the message metadata is somehow scraped.
Okay.
But I'm not sure if I'm speaking in technically correct terms. Probably not. And this was a long time ago since I read this. I think it was in 2018 when they implemented this. I think that Signal has like the lowest amount of metadata that there is when you compare this to any other, mainstream messaging app, even an encrypted one. But I think that they said that what they do have access is the last time you connected to Signal, which is what they can hand over to law enforcement if they're subpoenaed or something like that.
Yeah.
But they specifically said something like that they don't hold on to the to and from and timestamp of the specific messages. They don't hold on to that because they don't even hold on to the phone numbers. They only have them for creation, and I don't think they need them to handle the communication. I think they are using some sort of I'm not sure they're hashing them or something like that. It's been a long time since I read the documents and that.
I'm not sure about the phone numbers because that's what Signal uses to like match your phone book with Signal accounts. And hashing phone numbers is just useless because they're brute forced in an instant.
Okay.
So I'm not sure about how that works and how they do it, but there is still metadata, and I don't know how much right now, but just for the listeners to know that Signal also isn't the perfect system we're looking for. It's a very good step in the right direction.
Okay, but we are on the network security, so I don't want to digress too far.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Okay.
So, yep.
What you also asked me about is so having covered securing network connection themselves, what happens if your home router gets compromised? What's the risk there? So having a compromised home router is the same as being in a public Wi-Fi, where both the public Wi-Fi and your home router have the ability to initiate a connection to your device. This is different from the ISP because the ISP normally does not have the ability, but depending on the network topology the ISP implements, this might also be the case, but normally it isn't. So public Wi-Fi access points and your home router have the ability to open connections to your device. That is a problem when you have applications running on your device that listen for connections, in the sense of they accept connections from the network, like a server does. So, for example, if you're a developer, you might have software running that accepts connections from outside. Or for example, most of multiplayer games listen on the network to see if there's someone else to play the game with, or there's system services like multicast DNS, which resolves names within the local network. There are lots of things going on and that are able to that listen for new connections. And whenever one of these services on your device has a vulnerability, then the public Wi-Fi or your compromised home router can use this vulnerability to hack your device and get into it. So it just increases your attack surface. And I'd recommend to, especially if you're on in a public Wi-Fi, to increase your firewall settings and check them if they're okay. I think Windows still asks you if you join a new network, asks you if it's a public network or a private one, your home network. And selecting public network there will give you more security than selecting home network there, because Windows itself will turn off certain features and increase defenses in that regard.
Okay. Does it make sense to change your home router, login credentials and Wi-Fi password and Wi-Fi name?
Well, changing the Wi-Fi name doesn't really matter because that's kind of public knowledge anyway. But definitely change all the passwords on there. There's a lot of malware going for default passwords, and even websites that you load in your browser are, under circumstances, able to open a connection to your home router and hack it that way.
So what would they gain from this?
So they would mostly they just want another device for their botnet to run attacks on other stuff on the internet. They will at some point maybe just change the DNS server to deliver malicious payload to you. So with lots of these hacks, I'm not quite sure what threat model to put these, because these are just malicious actors on the internet seeking financial gain by whatever means. We haven't really put that in a threat model that we've defined. But it's one of these medium resource threat actors that are also active. But they don't target certain entities or people. So they're actively trying to exploit targets. So, but they don't have a distinct goal. They just hack whatever's available.
Yeah, they're just indiscriminately looking for whoever is the first victim.
Yeah, exactly. So there is some danger to there from that, especially because what malware often does is it's malware as a service. So there's a malware that infects your machine, and then other people can pay this often called botnet herder to install additional malware. So it's kind of like a service that will install malware for you on machines. So there's a whole ecosystem in that black market that is pretty fascinating to look into if someone is interested in that. But that's something to look out for. So, but changing default passwords goes a long way and it's really cheap. So we should definitely do that.
Okay.
In terms of attacking you and so this won't happen in threat model 1 or 2, because the threat actors we defined in threat model 2 won't go about hacking stuff, and the actors in threat model 1 won't have the resources to do so. But still, you should watch out for that, and that's just basic security hygiene that you can do.
Okay, makes sense. So how about if I run Tor or a VPN on a compromised router, or somebody hacks my home router and I'm on Tor? Am I safe?
Well, that's except for the increased attack surface I mentioned before. Okay. Tor would shield you, or VPN in that sense, would shield you from a malicious, from the other aspects of the malicious, a public Wi-Fi or a hacked home router, because what these can do, just like the ISP, they can see your whole web web activity. And HTTPS in that sense is not enough because there's so much metadata involved. First and foremost, there's DNS, which is just starting to get finally become encrypted with DNS over TLS and DNS over HTTPS, short DOT and DOH. But then you still have TLS itself, which when connecting a server, it has to tell the server in an unencrypted way which domain you're looking for so that the server can serve you the right certificate. And that's why even with every TLS or HTTPS connection, your device will, in clear text, in plain text, send the name of the domain that you're accessing. And with a lot of domains, it doesn't really matter anymore what the content is, because if you go to cancerhealing.com, or if you go to I don't know what democraticparty.com, well, it's really obvious what your interests are, and like it tells a story about you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all things that like your home router, the public Wi-Fi, and like every ISP your connection runs to can clearly see. And that's why people then start using Tor and VPN to get rid of that metadata aspect of that. And that's also a problem in another sense, because especially with a VPN, you just switch your ISP that you have to fully trust to a VPN that you have to fully trust. The VPN can't prove that it's not collecting all that data, just like the ISP is.
And maybe it's good to point out that most VPN providers don't actually serve their own own servers. They're just renting them from other companies in other places around the world.
Yeah, exactly. So there are like multiple parties involved that could log everything.
Yeah. So there could be an argument said that you are actually increasing your level of trust with a VPN.
Yes. Well, I like to like explain it as like you're switching trust. You're exchanging trust in one company for trusting another company.
Mm-hmm.
And in some cases, that is a really good deal, because the company that you're switching away from might be really shady, and you're really better off with that VPN company. In other cases, it might actually be the other way around, and the ISP you have is actually more trustworthy than the VPN you switch to using. So it's really an issue of trust and checking the companies that which services you use for their trust and what they're out for and what they believe in.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious. The one of the like security vulnerabilities of webmail end-to-end encryption is that it has to rely on JavaScript, and if somebody wants to compromise, your email account that is end-to-end encrypted, they can try to make you run a malicious JavaScript that decrypts your messages for the attacker. Mm-hmm. But if you like, one way to mitigate is could be that you use Tor so that they cannot guess your IP address based on which they would be able to inject a malicious JavaScript. Is this going to work, or are there other factors that need to be taken into account?
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
Tor is more effective at shielding your identity than a VPN is. But then again, one problem with Tor is that, especially if it's unencrypted connections, you're exiting the Tor network at the server of a random dude, and he can do whatever he likes with your traffic. And that's one aspect of Tor that I kind of dislike, where there's so much data flowing through Tor unencrypted that can be scooped up. And I think there was scientists a couple years ago, 5 or more, that scooped up a lot of credentials from embassies all around the world because they like to use Tor for privacy. But well, that didn't work out too well. And I think there was another scientist doing something in the same direction just half a year ago with a similar result. While we're up with HTTPS by a really big margin, that's great. There still is unencrypted traffic out there that's where passwords and usernames are transferred. This shouldn't be the case at all anymore, but there still is that problem. So in one sense, yes, you shield your IP address better, but you are, instead of trusting a company, you're trusting random dudes. And I don't know if that's an improvement or not.
I don't think this is a fair assessment of how the Tor protocol works, because each layer of encryption on which Tor has 3, I mean each hop which Tor has 3, there is a layer of encryption. So actually Tor has 3 layers of encryption, and each layer only knows where the request came from and where it's going, and it doesn't know the whole network. So I'm not sure what you mean by saying that there is a lot of unencrypted traffic.
The exit node will always see the traffic the same way that the rest of the internet sees it.
They don't see the entry node, which is an important point.
Yes, the thing is, if there's a username and password in plain text, you don't have to see the entry node because you're giving away that information about your identity in the connection.
Yeah, but that will be in case that the website is not using a TLS encryption.
That's correct. So if you're using TLS HTTPS, then everything's fine. But if you're not, then that's a problem with Tor.
But if you are not using TLS, it's a problem not just with Tor, it's a problem with everything. Because if you are not using Tor, then your traffic is unencrypted on clear internet and can be seen and tracked by anyone that the traffic goes through.
That is true, but I tend to trust a company that I pay for protecting my data more than a company, or like not a company, but just someone hosting a server somewhere. I don't notice the people that host these nodes.
I'm not.
I have no relationship to them.
I'm not sure you can actually prove that this is true, because when there is a company that has a business model of handling user data is one of the most sought after commodities in the modern world. Advertising industry is the fastest growing industry in the United States, and it is marginally the most profitable industry in the United States. It's actually more profitable than oil and the pharmaceutical industry, which has a lot to say behind it, because there is powerful interest behind oil and pharma. So whenever you handle user data, everybody is coming after you. Everybody wants to offer you money to buy your users' data. And WhatsApp was sold for $20 billion, and it was an end-to-end encrypted app. Skype used to be end-to-end encrypted. It was sold to Microsoft, and now all of the user data is in the hands of Microsoft and then the NSA. So we've had plenty of cases of companies that promised protection and then they sold. And actually, a better argument is that everybody has a price. And at some point, every business owner wants to cash out. There is rare cases when it's like with Lavabit, And for those who don't know, LavaBit was an email that was used by Snowden or recommended by Snowden. And when the FBI or NSA tried to get the keys, encryption keys, so that they could read users' emails, the owner of LavaBit, the business owner of the LavaBit, decided to shut down the whole service. So he literally shut down email. So you were no longer available to log in. That's a very rare case. He destroyed his company to protect his users' data. But this is very rare. And it almost never happens. So I don't think that you can trust the company just because it's making money. It's actually the case that because it's making money, it's more susceptible to powerful interests trying to sell the data to users.
Well, that is true, but if that's a really good argument. It really depends on the company. So, if I look at ISPs in Austria, which have a very strict law and which all make enough money with what they do, so they don't have to sell data in order to survive, and then there are by law prohibited from selling any data of their customers' traffic, then I trust my local Austrian ISP more than I trust a random Tor exit node.
But the fear of the Tor exit nodes is way overstated, because if you run the Tor exit node, you mentioned that if there is no encryption, but there is encryption almost everywhere. It's very rare to stumble upon an unencrypted website. And Tor actually comes pre-installed with an HTTPS everywhere, which is going to force encryption. And you can easily change the setting to block all unencrypted traffic. So you'll never have this problem. And that's actually not a problem of Tor. It's a problem of the owner of the website that doesn't use encryption. So I don't think that you can make the argument that you are losing anything when you connect to Tor except for speed, because especially if you're connecting to an Onion server, because that's entirely hidden in the network, and you can make a server that not even the entire traffic is like completely hidden, doesn't know where it started, doesn't know where it ended. And the only way you could try to figure it out if you are a powerful global adversary like the NSA and you are observing the entire network and could potentially correlate the timings between entry connection and exit connection. And that would have to be targeted. You would have to be closely following your target. But the exit node, you said the exit node gives you access to do whatever you want with that traffic. I would like you to explain that, because what does it mean to do whatever you want? They can tamper with the traffic. They can change the traffic. What they can do? Can they make the traffic look like there's a malicious activity? To frame somebody, or what they can do?
So just to get back to you on the other topic you mentioned, so you briefly went into the darknet topic, where Tor not only hides the client but also hides the server. And well, in these cases, of course, the traffic is fully encrypted because that's guaranteed by the Tor network, and that's a total legitimate use case for Tor, and a really good one if that's something that you require to use. Regarding the exit node traffic, so the last, if you build up a connection within Tor, the last node, the exit node, then peels off the last layer of the onion, and then it sees the traffic as it would have gone through the internet without using Tor. So if this traffic at this point isn't additionally protected with TLS, aka HTTPS in most cases, the the Tor exit node can first of all read everything that's in there, but it can also launch a man-in-the-middle attack on that connection and do however it pleases. I must say, it's not that Tor exit nodes can't just do that at random, because there are several services that continually scan for bad exit nodes and will flag them as such. So you can't go and just in bulk attack everyone that's on there. But if you selectively target someone and have some kind of means of figuring out with the probability who that is, then of course you can attack unencrypted connections that go through the Tor network. As soon as it leaves Tor, it's just a normal connection again. There's all the protection that Tor provides at that point is over, except for not being able to tell what the IP address of the original client is.
Yeah, which can be an important factor when
it is a very important factor.
Yeah. Everything that can be said about an exit node can be said about any point on the clear internet without an overlay network like Tor.
Exactly.
So this is not a weakness of Tor, this is a weakness of design. At some point, if you are connecting to a clear net, which is not an onion or darknet server, at some point the encrypted traffic has to be decrypted, because encryption has to be supported at both ends, and if it doesn't, it has to be decrypted. So when you have a VPN, the traffic is decrypted at the VPN server, which means the VPN controls in both encryption and decryption, whereas on Tor, the same person who encrypted your traffic is not the same person who carried your traffic, and it is not the same person that decrypted your traffic. So it creates it's a design with less trust and not more trust, I would say. It's
true.
It's a more,
it definitely is. Definitely is.
Okay.
I think the point I'm wanting to make is that I feel that Tor is just glorified into oblivion, and people are missing out important aspects, that Tor is not the final solution to end all discussions about network security. It's really good that Tor exists, and Tor is a really, really good tool to use if you know what to use it for.
Exactly. That's an important point. Yeah.
Yeah. So not to like have Tor is the it fixes everything thing and just blindly use it.
But if there is glorification, it is not coming from the Tor project or the developers of the Tor protocol, because they are upfront about the limitations of Tor. And this is unlike any VPN provider, because VPN providers, because they are businesses, they are overselling what they actually provide. They tell you that their connections will make you anonymous, which they never will, or that they will make you private, maybe somewhat, and they will make you secure. That is true. Like more secure. That is partly true, but because of TLS, that is pretty much rendered useless unless you're on a hostile network or a public network. But Tor never makes these claims, and never made these claims. Tor, if you boot up Tor browser for the first time, and any Tor application, basically, if it's properly implemented, that will tell you that it is not enough. Like, Tor will not make you anonymous if you share your personal information on a forum,
Exactly.
The way I like that the way to think about Tor is as a traffic analysis resistance tool. Traffic analysis resistance tool. And that's a very good term to describe what Tor does. It helps you be resistant to traffic analysis, which traffic analysis is a form of attack where somebody who's trying to observe your attack and observe your traffic and interpret the data and see what you are doing and see where you're going, and use that information however they want.
Yeah, that's a very nice term. I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to move on to the browser security?
Yeah, sure. I think we're finished. Or do you want to add something more?
I'm pretty much finished. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so cool. Let's move to browser security. So the first thing I want to start here with is Microsoft a long time ago wrote these 10 immutable laws of security, and the number one rule from that list is if a bad guy can persuade you to run his program on your computer, it's not solely your computer anymore. And I really like that, how they did that. And if you look at browsers, and what you do all day is you do exactly that. Every time you open a website, there's a potential that some guy placed malicious JavaScript on that page, and it is executed on your CPU, and it may even succeed in hacking your device or hacking something around you. And this is the scary aspect of the whole browser security thing. Now we just will execute everything on our machines that the internet throws at us. And that's the main concern when it comes to browser security, that JavaScript from a security perspective is a nightmare, and it is really difficult to have a working internet and kind of working websites and still be secure while browsing the internet. And JavaScript makes this really hard. To give you some examples, how that can look like, there have been websites have been hacked and malicious JavaScript has been put there. Web libraries, so content distribution networks have been hacked, and libraries have been infected with malicious code, and there have been ads that also ship malicious JavaScript. That's a really cool thing, I think, just to just get some money, buy lots of ad space on the internet, just ship your malicious JavaScript with it. Just like kind of, there's a service for that to like deliver your exploit to whoever. And then the great thing is the ad network will also allow you to select what kind of groups of people you want to target. So kind of it gives you a perfect attack platform to find the target you're looking for. And that's a problem that the ad industry, I feel, hasn't really been serious enough about. And that's why an ad blocker is not only for making the internet more viewable, but it's actually a really important security tool to reduce the amount of random JavaScript running on your computer. So in the sense of browser security, please install a good ad block. I think the recommended one here is now uBlock Origin, which is really good.
Yeah.
And that's something that will go far with very little effort.
Yeah.
And if you're wanting to go further than that, I challenge you to just turn off JavaScript with an extension, or maybe the browser you're using can do it by itself, and then just turn it on whenever a site is broken. So just have it off by default, and only when you have the feeling that the site you're just currently browsing is weird or some buttons aren't working, then enable JavaScript. But browse with JavaScript disabled by default.
That's a good advice, and from my experience, I can say it's very liberating.
In what sense liberating?
Because like it's like you're just reading a page from a book. You know, it strips the website from a lot of the junk that is visually there, and it kind of like distracts your attention from the center, which is usually the text that you want to read.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like, you know, like I don't know, it's just a clean experience of the web if it works.
Yeah. So continuing with browser security, this is so these attacks are again this most of them are in this in-between threat model that we didn't define, where you have like a mid-resourced active adversary that doesn't specifically target you, but just targets whoever tends to be exploitable. But there are tools if someone like from threat model 1 with low resources maybe has a little bit of technical background. There's a system that's a fully automated exploit kit for browsers. So if you can do a man-in-the-middle attack on someone and that person happens to open an unencrypted website, then this project would automatically check the browser, what version it has, would check what features are enabled, and can automatically exploit that browser and get access to that machine. So there's a really funny story about that. When I was in university, a couple of colleagues and I were just hanging out at a local coffee shop and just talking, and one of us was just like typing on his computer, and so I think we were working on some group project, and at some point just Windows started popping up on one of our laptops, and the guy who had this one was like a weird out, like, what is happening? And the other guy just started laughing because he just used that framework to hack his colleague just for fun while working on a group project. So, of course, you need some skill for that, and you need some technical understanding. But if you know how it works, well, it is totally doable to do something like that.
That's hilarious and scary at the same time.
Yeah, it is. It is. I was a bit creeped out too. So like, what?
Yeah.
I'm gonna be careful around you. So, but the cool thing is, it looks like that guy who did the hack will actually start working for us in the near future. So I'm looking forward to that.
Nice.
Have fun. Okay, so yeah, again, what's really important for browsers is TLS. You already mentioned HTTPS everywhere. That's a very good starting point. So HTTPS is really important for all things related to browser security.
Okay.
I think that concludes that topic. Or do you want to add something more?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Great. So I think then we'll hop into the last big topic we have, which is very much related to browser security, and it's authentication security. and it's the topic of the passwords. So every one of us has loads of passwords, and passwords are a hassle to deal with. And there are a couple of warnings here and a couple of new stuff that's going on. It's really exciting. But before we hop into that, I'd like to explain what types of authentication are available on the internet and what their difference is, and that's really important. So let's just start with the normal password. The password is just a phrase or a combination of characters that you type into the form of a website, and that is then encrypted in transit. But then the server has this password in clear text and compares it with the database. And almost all services on the internet use a one-way function. So they convert the password to some gibberish and just save the gibberish in their database, and they can convert that gibberish back to your password. So if you send them your password, they will just make the same conversion again, check if the gibberish, the new gibberish and the gibberish in the password in the database is the same, and then they'll know that it's the real password. That's not always the case, and if that's not the case, that makes leaks even worse because you have all these clear text passwords lying around. But the problem is still that whenever you log in, your password will be present on a server for a short duration. And whenever that is the case, someone can steal your password and can use the password to authenticate to the server, and the server will think that the actor is you, and he will be very easily be able to impersonate you. And also, whoever is, if the connection is unencrypted, you can just snatch the password out of a connection on the internet and do the same thing. So there's no security on the wire, and there's no or little security on the server. The second method is like a one-time password, which is, I think, only used as a second factor. So it is like a 6-digit thing. You use your phone to generate one, or there are like hardware versions of that, or like there are password managers that can do it for you too. And so how this works is there's a secret key, and the secret key is combined with the current time, and then this spits out a random number that then you enter in the form on the website and get sent to the server. And the nice thing about that is that this password changes every minute or every 30 seconds. So if you snatch it from the wire, it'll only be valid for another maybe 10 to 20 seconds. But after that, the password will be invalid again. So that's very nice that it won't be valid forever. But then, in this case, the secret that you have must also be on the server, so that the server can verify that this time-based one-time password is valid. So again, the server could leak that data, and someone could start impersonating you with that information. So it's better in some aspects, but still it's not really perfect. But recently WebAuthn got standardized, and that's a really cool and new way to authenticate on the web. So WebAuthn is kind of like how TLS works with certificates, but the other way around. So first you connect to the server with TLS, and the server has a certificate, and it shows you that, and then you know, hey, it's that server. And with WebAuthn, you have a certificate. So you have a private key that's only on your device or on your hardware key fob. And with that, you sign some kind of challenge, and then the server can verify that you are you. And the nice thing is that if you snatch it in transit, there you can't reuse it again because there's a challenge response mechanism built into it. So you can't just snatch it from the wire and impersonate someone. And also, there's no information stored on the server that will allow you to impersonate that person. So that's the best solution of all, but it's still in the process of getting adopted, and it needs more time until this is really standard. So right now we're still kind of with the password and two-factor stuff, but very soon we'll be switching to that as a standard. There already are numerous websites that support the new WebAuthn standard, and if you want to go down that route, that will be something really good and will make you more secure, because that's the main thing, especially with threat model 1, where with all these leaks it's kind of easy to get some kind of old password, and then you can try that one or derive an alternative version that because you may choose a similar password in the future. So passwords are a real pain when it comes to security, and security wise you want to get rid of them as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm. So how can users get access to these WebAuthn?
So the most prominent company with WebAuthn is YubiKey. They sell these hardware tokens that you can use. Alternatively, there's a company called Solo Keys, which also sell these kinds of tokens. So this whole ecosystem is pretty fresh, and there are a couple heads ups for that. When you lose that token, you're locked out. So you might want to buy 2 tokens and register both of them at every website. So if one gets broken or you lose one, you still have the other one. Some websites have some kind of recovery mechanism that you can use to recover your account if you lose your key, but some don't really, and we'll be careful with that. So that's also one thing where you see this is a pretty fresh technology, and the industry hasn't yet gotten its head around how to handle this exactly. And also the YubiKey and also the alternatives, there's in addition to WebAuthn, which is the newest thing, which is also called U2F or FIDO2, they support these 2-factor authentication things, which have way better support. But then it's a bit unclear when the token is using which kind of system, and everything is a bit confusing still. And so you really feel that it's a new technology, but it's definitely the way to go. And if there's this one service or these 3 services that you're really concerned about, then maybe get a YubiKey just for them, because it'll make you way more secure.
Okay. I don't think you mentioned it, but when you say token or this authentication key, in practical terms for a general user, it's basically a USB key. So it's like a USB type A, and when you are trying to authenticate, you type in your password and then the website asks you to authenticate. So you plug in your YubiKey into the USB slot, or if you have a mobile device, you can slide it near your device or slide across your device, and it should register that key as an authentication.
Mm-hmm.
Just to explain for the user.
Yeah.
Yep.
So this is something that's really cool that's coming, but let's have a look at where we're at now. So right now we're stuck with passwords mostly, and often we already have two-factor authentication, which is the six-digit thing almost the six-digit thing I explained earlier. Two-factor authentication is also done sometimes over SMS or text messages, which is less secure, but it's better than nothing. So, except if you don't want to associate an account with your phone number, then, well, that's not going to work out for you. So use two-factor authentication wherever you can. In that sense, also have backups of these two-factor secrets. So either use an app that does backups for you, or what you can do is also like save them somewhere secure. So all these QR codes you have to like make a scan with whatever app you're using. You can just save these and put them somewhere secure to have a backup. So because if you lose your phone with the two-factor codes, then well, you're stuck with the same problem as with the YubiKey, the WebAuthn, as before. So, but it's just easier to make backups because there's a key, a secret key, like a distinct QR code for every website.
Yeah.
And you can save them, or better yet, use an app that has a backup functionality built in.
So if somebody gets access into these backups, they can get access into your account. So what's the best way to securely store the backups? Just encrypt them somewhere on a flash drive?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Encrypt them and put them somewhere safe.
Outside of your main device, or like on a flash drive in a drawer?
Yeah. If you have flash drives, maybe make two backups because flash drives tend to just die.
Okay.
So to be sure, make two of your flash drives and put them somewhere secure. If they're encrypted with a good password, you could also just leave them on the device you're using. But if that device dies and that's your only device, then everything's gone again. So have it distributed over multiple devices, or if it's encrypted with a good password, you can also upload it to a cloud service that is not protected by two-factor authentication, because, well, if you lose your two-factor device and then can't access the backup because you need two-factor, well, that's a problem. So, just think about think about a disaster recovery process and maybe play it through once.
Yeah.
So with these two new technologies explained, let's have a look at the most difficult one, which is the normal password. So it is important to have good passwords, and good passwords are really difficult to remember. So I really urge everyone to get a password manager and have the password manager generate random, long, and complex passwords. Because, well, password guessing is still a thing, and if you have a good password manager, you can just use them really quick in your browser, and you won't have to remember all these passwords anymore, and it's just way more secure. If you're doing the transition, please also have a check at the service called Have I Been Pwned, which is a tremendous service that collects all these leaked usernames and passwords, and it'll tell you whenever something, one of your accounts is part of a leak. And this is getting more and more attention, and there's also something called Firefox Monitor, which uses that database to tell you if something is in a breach. Or also there are password managers that have this service included in their service, so it'll automatically tell you, the password manager itself will tell you if any of the passwords you're using is found in any of the leaks, which is very convenient to not reuse any passwords that have been ever leaked.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just the two things I want to say about passwords. Use a password manager and check, have I been pwned, or use their service in some kind of indirect way with Firefox Monitor or Password Manager.
Okay. And also to secure the password, the password manager with a strong passphrase. That's the only passphrase that you need to remember.
Exactly, and it should be a really good one, a long one, and I'm sure you can give a detailed introduction how to think about a good password.
Yeah. It's like Snowden said, like it should be something like Margaret Thatcher is 110% sexy. So
yeah,
a passphrase,
like really weird, unrelated, long.
but you can remember it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's, I didn't know that one before, so that's really funny. And don't use that one because every hack will try it as of now.
The password for the CIA vault was splintered into 1,000 pieces and scattered it into the winds, and that is the sentence that John Fitzgerald Kennedy said about the CIA before he was assassinated. Mm-hmm. That's the biggest irony in the world.
Yeah, it is. Wow. Cool. So I think it wraps up authentication security, and to make a link to threat models again, this is especially important for threat model 1, where through all these leaks, a low resource active attacker can actually be very successful in hacking accounts with just all that leaked information about you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And definitely don't use a password that's like a combination of your favorite, singer and your date of birth or personally identifiable information or something that is publicly available.
Never use stuff like that.
Yeah, for anything.
Which is a problem because there multiple companies have password reset routines that ask exactly that information. So they will want to know stuff like what's your maiden name, like what's the maiden name of your mom, what's kind of the street you grew up in, and that's all information that is more or less public that you can find out if you have enough time.
Yeah.
And that's all part of open source intelligence. And so really be aware what information about you is out there.
Yeah, one way you can go around this is that you can use your password manager to create random answers to these questions.
That is true. That's a very good way to go about this. I've done that myself too.
Yeah. Is there any particular password manager that you would like to recommend, or because there are some password manager mechanisms that are to be avoided, and I don't know the technical terms right now. But there's, if you know, master password, versus something like KeyPass. So people have been very critical of the mechanism of master password. If you want to mention that,
don't use that. That's not a good idea, because whenever your master secret is compromised, everything is. And well, it's just not a good idea to go that route. Every password should be really generated freshly and not be derivated from some kind of other information.
Mm-hmm.
One other password manager that I really like is 1Password. Especially if you're in the Apple ecosystem. They have great support there. They were actually bought by Apple recently, which is however you want to see it, a plus or a minus on that side. But I like one of their key concepts a lot, which is having two passwords, or one of them they call secret key, which is just a long password that you're not meant to remember, but to print out and put somewhere. And the other is the actual password that you remember in your head. So it's not enough to just know the password, you need a secret key. So it's kind of a two-factor, but both are passwords-ish.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not enough just to have a keylogger somewhere. You actually have to know the secret key too. And I like how they did that, and it does increase security, especially because people just tend to have weak passwords.
Yeah.
And it solves one aspect of that problem very, very nicely.
Okay. Sounds great.
So I think that wraps up authentication security.
I think it does, and I think that was our last topic.
That's true, and maybe something that plays into both of these topics very well is how, like, related to passwords, is how you use email addresses on the internet. So the last topic is, we mentioned that before already, is operational security, so OPSEC, which is all the process part of security, not the tool part. And it's about you knowing what you're doing and not entering information where you shouldn't, and not opening links you shouldn't, and not opening attachments that are possibly malicious, and all that stuff. So it's about decisions that you make as a user, and not where tools just won't help you. And one nice part of that plays into authentication security is emails. So especially in the threat model 1, where someone is trying to track you, I'd recommend you to use an email alias service. So there are services out there that will give you the option to create loads of emails that will just forward everything to your real email address. So then you can use these fake emails kind of to sign up for services. And that will make it much harder for anyone to track you through various online services and see where you have accounts and all that stuff. Because especially in all these password leaks, you can just search for an email and you'll get 5 to 10 accounts on various services. And you know, okay, I'm gonna just try to hack one that's easy to hack and use the password from there on all the other services. And bingo, there's a good chance you hacked all of the accounts. So by also using different email addresses, it's more difficult to link together your different online accounts, and also it provides more privacy in addition to that. So that's something you can use. Like, this is operational security. There's not a tool. Of course, there's a service behind it, but you have to use that and enter that into the email field whenever you create an account online.
Yeah, especially if those email addresses are not guessable. So it's not like first name dot last name at serviceprovider.com.
Yeah. So operational security is really the hardest part of all that, and it helps to just be up to date. Maybe subscribe to some newsletter so that you know what is happening, what attacks are currently common, and what to expect and stuff like that. Maybe you know someone who's um better at security than you, and just ask them questions, or do other things. For example, I think fishtank.com, a website that collects phishing sites, they have a test that you can go through that helps you train to see if an email is a phishing mail or not. And that can help you build up a good operational security process and knowledge about that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you want to add something more to operational security at this point.
No, I've been just thinking about all that you've been saying about this because it's a really complicated issue, and it's really the one that speaks. Like, it's not about the tool. It's about the piece of me that's behind the tool, which is the person. It's the ape. So, like you're trying to be like reasonably discreet about your security setup. You don't want to advertise that you just bought, I don't know, what kind of Wi-Fi router you bought, or what kind of device necessarily you have, or what software you run, or what password manager you run, because if your attacker knows that what password software you run or what VPN provider you use, then it gives them more information they can use to attack you. So you want to conceal as much information as possible, and sometimes you should not be afraid to lie, especially if it's for services that request some personal data, but they don't necessarily need it for the service to be delivered. Like you can easily, you need to make sure that you're legally covered, so that there are not going to be legal problems when you give incorrect information about yourself. But you don't always have to give your like your most personal information when the website asks for it. And especially if you're just creating a website, creating an account with a temporary email address or address alias. That's like your operation security is really about like protecting the information, concealing it, and preventing the adversary from learning about your system. Really.
There's a really great story from the leader, the founder of Badass Army, about how they used open source intelligence to find someone, which gives a really good insight, like what the different myriads of possibilities there are to identify and track someone. And I'll send you a link for that story. That's a really good introduction into operation security, what to watch out for, kind of packed into a story. How someone was tracked down, actually.
Yeah, this is actually very good advice. If you want to learn operation security, one of the best educational vectors is to just study how other people got caught. Criminals or other people. Exactly. Like the guy that was running Silk Road, he was caught because of very bad OPSEC. He was caught because he shared his personal email account, Gmail, on an Onion router, and he said something like, "It's almost as if I was running this, illegal website, not saying that I do, but something like that, to that effect." And that's how the FBI was able to track him down, even though he was using Tor, and they did not. Like the FBI did not compromise Tor, but they were able to see this information and get a general idea who might be behind the Silk Road, and
just link pieces of information together until you get a better picture of who that person is and how to find him.
So studying how other people got caught is one of the best ways to learn from their mistakes.
Yeah, totally.
And I think that's it. We did it.
Yeah. So I think I've said everything I want to. I'll send you a couple of references. I'll send you a couple right now.
Mm-hmm.
They're already dug up in the meanwhile. But I will send you that story about that open source intelligence thing,
Mm-hmm.
which is really cool. So, but I think that's it. Yep. So if you have any questions in the next couple of weeks about when you're like writing this guide or so, feel free to ping me. I'll try to answer
Mm-hmm.
soon-ish. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you very much for your help, and thank you for coming here. Thank you for sacrificing your time. It's been 3.5 hours, and I hope that people will find this valuable. I think
Yeah,
we did.
thanks.
Yeah, I think we did go into depth, and I really appreciate that you came in here.
Thanks for having me. It was fun talking about all that stuff and having a conversation and just sharing things I know and helping out people. I love that.
That's good. People will definitely find this useful.
Great.
Good luck with your journey and with your security career path, and
Thanks.
With your company as well. I hope that it takes off, and I don't know what else to say other than just have a great weekend.
Thanks. You too. I'm really excited to see how this guide turns out and how well the whole thing will be. So
I hope I'll do it
thanks.
justice. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. I'm sure you will. Okay, so I'm gonna have to get going. So have a good weekend.
Yep.
And
Thank you.
See you around.
Yep. See ya.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Bye.